Ah, sorry. I think you can hear me now. Is that any better? Can you hear me? I think I had my thing on mic mute. I'm just going to double check. Give me a second. I'll look up my YouTube site to see everything is okay. Um, right. Give me a second. Right. So as I was saying, I just walked through the door. Yes, you can hear me. Fantastic. Hiya, guys. It's great to be here again, and we've got 200 odd people online. That's fantastic. All right, excellent. Right, so I'm being deluged with lots and lots of things now. So I can get I've heard a lot of cooked. I'm cooked quite a lot of times in this message in this call. So I'm going to be looking at some of your messages as we go along. But I've noticed there are too many messages coming in. So I'm going to do something about that. Give me a second. I'm going to do my authoritarian thing and cut the amount of times you can send a message. Otherwise, it's going to get too complicated. So give me a second while I set that up. And no more cooked, guys. Come on. Let's move beyond this word cooked. It doesn't mean anything either, really. Right, I'm putting slow mode on now. So from this point onwards, you can only send me a message once every 60 seconds, right? So there's no more throwing lots of messages at me. Okay, right. So what have we got? So the idea behind today is, thank you. I'm Hobbes's Leviathan. I take that as a compliment. I'm pretty impressed that you even know about Hobbes's Leviathan, to be honest. This is the Leviathan state. Exactly. Fantastic. Now you know. Now you know who I am. Um, so, excellent. Right, excellent. So, where are we? I need your questions. I am going to look at my Substack because if I remember, I did ask for your questions. So I need you to send me your questions. And let's say from now, so if you've already sent me a question, then it's fine. So Nora's going to be joining us as well. So Nora should be here to answer some of your questions as well. And some of you may know Nora has been putting a lot of effort into the website and also my TikTok. So she is ready to answer some of your questions as well. Okay. Right. So here we go. For a question on equality socialism. Is the link between equality and human nature that inequality detaches man from society and his communities eroding fraternity and social nature? I like that, Evie. I think that's a really good thing. So I think you're right. Um, I think so. If you think about equality and human nature, I mean, the way to think about socialists and revolutionary socialists in particular, when they view equality, they say equality is the natural state of human beings. So our base is to be equal. Our like very basic inclination is to live in an equal society. Capitalism comes along and capitalism corrupts us, right? So capitalism makes us into something we're not, and it takes away our a natural propensity towards equality. So capitalism comes along and removes that from our psyche, for the way we think. And so, what revolutionaries in particular, but also social democrats, would argue, is we have this sort of propensity, and so when you move beyond a capitalist society, and you move into an ideologically socialist society, then what you end up having is you end up having a society which is slowly removing the badnesses of capitalism. It's reinvigorating our consciousness, so the false consciousness of capitalism is being removed, and in its process, in its wake, what's happening is we are returning back to our human natures. And so a utopian society, a revolutionary society, would no more than allow us to return back to our inner selves, return us back to who we really are as human beings. And I think that's how you view it, right? So I hope that makes sense. So how are we going to do this? Because I'm conscious. Oh, Nora's here as well. Fantastic. So we've got Nora. Nora, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. Right. So you all should be able to hear Nora as well. So Nora's here to answer some of your questions as well. Can someone explain the veil of ignorance, Lena? So I'm just randomly picking questions there. I'm going to rely on Nora to pick out the sensible questions or the better questions, and she will list them. But there's a question here. Can someone explain the veil of ignorance? That's from Lena. Right. So let me bring something up. In fact, give me a second, and I will bring something up on the screen to help you with that. Unless Nora, you would like to give us your take.
On the veil of ignorance.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm as qualified as you to answer that kind of
Okay.
question.
No, I can do that. I can do it. So, the way veil of ignorance comes from Rawls, John Rawls, right? And John Rawls is trying to understand the type of society we all want to believe in, we all want to live in, right? So the type of world we want to live in. And in his book, A Theory of Justice, he developed this idea, let's call it a contraption or like a philosophical contraption, like a philosophical way of doing things. He basically said that imagine before you were born, you lived in a veil of ignorance, like you didn't know what your outcome would be. Are you going to be in the 10% mega rich? Or are you going to be in the 90% or 80 to 70% middle? Or are you going to be in the 20% very poor? You don't know any of that. So you live in a veil of ignorance, right? You don't know whether you're going to be in that top percent or middle percentile or in the lower percentile. What type of society would you want to live in? And he concluded that when you're in a pre-birth state, if you were given that choice, the likelihood is in your ignorance you would choose a society which doesn't have a few rich people and lots of poor people or lots of struggling people. You'd have a type of society that tends towards justice and equality, right? So you wouldn't, like, if you ask someone now who's got a multi-millionaire what type of society they want to live in, they don't have the veil of ignorance. They don't have this sort of ignorance around them. They don't have this sort of blindfold. And so they're living in a lap of luxury. And so they would respond by saying, well, I want more of what I have, right? So he argued that that's because you're asking the people at this moment where they want to be, because they're either very rich or middle or very poor. Rather, if you ask someone before they were born in a state of ignorance, in this veil of ignorance, where they want to be, they would actually sort of want to be in a society which isn't too filthy rich, which isn't poor, but a society where everyone is sort of roughly similar, not equal, but have similar opportunities. They live in a roughly equal society, not a socialist equal society, by the way, but in a roughly equal society. And that's a type of capitalist society we would want to live in, right? Not, in other words, like an Americanized neoliberal Reagan Thatcher type of society, but we want to live in a maybe more Scandinavian. And by the way, Scandinavia isn't particularly great at this moment, but like a Scandinavian society where you put in money in taxation, and you're getting good health and housing, and you're getting good quality of education. And that's the type of society we want to live in, a just society. So he tended towards justice. What is he trying to do, John Rawls? John Rawls is trying to address the classical liberal idea, which is that leave us alone, laissez-faire capitalism, leave us alone, and that's how we achieve our freedom. Don't allow the state to overreach and tell us how to live our lives. And what he's trying to do, he's trying to fix that. He's trying to address that problem. I hope that makes sense. Hope that makes sense. Again, I'm not going to spend a large amount of time on this, but I hope that makes sense. Let's get more questions. Nora, is there anything here that interests you?
There are so many. So Purple Sniper has asked about the main party's agreement on Palestine and how you would structure that in a paragraph. And I
Good.
think that's good because it's very
Yeah.
contemporary.
Yeah. Do you want me to take that, or would you like to?
Well, personally, I mean, you'd be able to go into more detail, but
Oh,
it's brought the Conservative and Labour Party a lot closer, because both of them have kind of taken an authoritarian measure and, and justify Israel's quote unquote self-defense. That's how they justify it. However, it's also caused disunity within their own party. A lot of Labour MPs have obviously lost the whip because of it, or completely abstained from votes. Yeah.
Well, that's very good. I mean, so I think it's worth saying that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are basically on the same at the same place when it comes to Israel and Gaza. So at the very beginning of this conflict, after October 7th, both parties in effect said that Israel has a right to self-defense, and any accusation that Israel is going too far was knocked down by both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. In fact, if you remember, Keir Starmer went on LBC radio and said that Israel even has the right to break international law, which is to shut down water, food, and energy for the people of Gaza, which is atrocious. Really, it's a war crime. And as we learned today, the ICC have now put out an indictment for Netanyahu because he has committed war crimes, right? So both parties have stuck with Israel and its right to self-defense. Now, so in a sense, on Gaza and on, they are quite similar. So where then is the difference? Well, I think the only big difference is that when the heat got too much for Labour, so the analysis is that Labour was quite happy to keep to this horrible position, by the way, because they've given license to Israel to commit war crimes, right? But when they got a real condemnation from their own MPs, or some of them, in particular the left-wingers, when they started to lose councillors, and they lost Oxford Council, for example, because I think something like 8 or 9 councillors resigned, so they lost their control over the council. And when what you ended up having is in the local recent elections, there were a great number of seats where in the local elections where Labour candidates, Labour councillors did pretty badly, and independent councillors did pretty well, right? And these were in seats where you've got large Muslim populations. And so what's happened recently, and that's the analysis, what's happened recently is that Labour has started to ask more questions. Now, they haven't changed their basic position, but they've started to say that the government needs to reveal their legal advice. What have the government lawyers told them about Israel's right to self-defense? Or, they haven't said that we shouldn't be giving weapons to Israel because Britain provides all of the weapons, or a lot of the weapons that Israel needs to prosecute its war. They haven't gone as far as to say that we're going to now sanction Israel, but they have asked questions about it and said, as long as this is legal, are you sure it's legal? So they've questioned the government, but they haven't contradicted the government. Do you see? So the questioning is there, but not the contradiction. And the tone, really, they've tried to change the tone ever so little and be a little bit more critical of Israel. But they're very aware that they can't be and they shouldn't be completely critical of Israel. So I think on a basic level, they're very similar. But on some issues, they're questioning the government. And they think by questioning the government, they can somehow win back those voters that they've lost in the election. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I think you could almost do an entire paragraph on that. And if you wanted to extend it to, if it was a question about, to what extent do the parties agree or disagree, you could even talk about foreign policy as your paragraph, bring in Gaza as your main section, but also then talk about China. So on China, again, both parties are very similar. They have a very similar position, which is that China is increasingly becoming a problem, and so we should see them as a strategic competitor. So they use that term, a strategic competitor, but at the same time, they're not willing to call them an enemy like some Americans are calling them an enemy. I think the basic analysis when it comes to foreign policy is that both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party want to echo US foreign policy. They don't want to be seen to be too away from the US foreign policy. And of course, if they're too far away from US foreign policy, so I'm just sorting my cushion out, my seat here. I've got this seat which is particularly problematic. Sorry, and I've got to fix it. So so they don't want to be seen to be too away from the American position. So you can say, on a basic level, whatever America says, they will say, right? When America got a little bit critical of Israel, they started to get a little bit critical of Israel. And the Labour Party in particular needs to do that because the Labour Party wants to come across as a party of government. And if you're going to be a Labour government, you've got to be good on the economy, and you've got to be close to the Americans on foreign policy. And that's effectively what they're trying to do at the moment. They're trying to do that. Right. How does that sound to all of you guys? I hope that makes sense. I'm scrolling down. Oh, there are tons of questions here. So
I am finding it hard to keep up.
yeah.
I'm trying to answer some of them in the comments.
Yeah. There's a good point from JT here. David Lammy, Shadow Foreign Secretary, said Trump is misunderstood on defense, showing they follow US politicians. Yeah. Now he knows. By the way, he used to call Trump a racist, right? But he's now realizing that he's going to probably he may be the next foreign minister. He probably is going to be next foreign secretary. And so he's got to, and Trump is probably going to be the next prime minister, president. And so he's got to change his position on Trump. And that's why he did that. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of people are asking for you to talk about media and voting behaviour.
Yeah.
I think a lot. So
yeah, so let me say a few words about voting behavior in particular and how you should approach voting behavior, because I've always said, and I know some teachers find this difficult to accept, and so I appreciate it. You may decide that you're not going to do it this way, right? Because your teacher has taught you something different. But I personally would do most voting behavior questions by elections, making sure that within each election paragraph you compare with other elections in order to get your analysis marks, right? So, for example, you may get a question on, evaluate the view. In fact, let me show you my screen. I'm going to present my screen share. Imagine if you got, yeah. Okay, I hope you can see that. Right. So evaluate the view that the media have a decisive impact on the outcome of elections. I would probably do like this: 2019, 97, and 83. Now, teachers are going to say to me, but that's too simplistic, because then you're not going to get analysis marks. But the way to get analysis marks is when you talk about, in this paragraph, when you talk about 2019, what I would do is I would say, unlike 97, similar to 83, for example. If it was 83, it could be any of the elections before or after 97, of course. So I would probably make comparisons between elections within my paragraphs in order to get my analysis marks. But I would probably do most of my voting, if not all of my voting behavior questions, according to elections. And in answer to your question about how to look at elections, if the question was about media, my first half of my first paragraph will be how the media has impacted the 2019 election. And then I will counter it with how the media doesn't impact the 2019, and also how didn't impact 2019, but also how other factors like social factors or policies or economy impacted 2019 more, right? So media does impact, countered by media doesn't impact, and there are other factors that were more important in 2019. Same with 97, same with 79 or 83. I would do it like that. And I would make sure within the paragraph, when I'm talking about the 83 election or 90 or 79 election, I would say in 1979, similar to Corbyn, the Callaghan government, they ran on a two left-wing ticket. Or in the 83 election, like Corbyn, the manifesto was too big. There was too many promises. And because there were too many promises, that enabled the opposition in the media to attack the Labour Party, right? And to attack their inability to put together a good quality manifesto. Do you see? I hope that makes sense, right? So I would probably do something like that. But yeah, I think a media question is fairly straightforward, because you're talking about media and then you're talking about other factors. And you're asking the question, in this case, is it the decisive impact? And I would say most of the time it isn't. And I would say have a stock answer. My stock answer would be that normally it's the economy. Sorry. So the major reason why an election is won or lost is because of economic policy. Normally, that's what people mostly care about in terms of elections, uh, and then followed by the personality of the prime minister. That matters quite a lot. Followed by the way they've run their campaigns. Maybe the way Theresa May ran her campaign pretty badly. Um, Followed by some social factors, right? But I think social factors are becoming less and less important. I mean, probably the biggest social factor we can talk about today is that the younger people tend to vote Labour and older people tend to vote Conservative, and that when it comes to education and non-education, Labour have basically scooped up all of the educated votes. Even Corbyn, by the way, had captured the educated elites in the cities, but in the countryside and in the non degree, but well, by education we mean degree, in the non-degree bracket, Conservatives are now dominating. At least that was the 2019 election. So there's been a role reversal almost, right? But I'm not sure if that's going to hold out. It may hold out actually because I think Keir Starmer will probably hit the same demographic of the educated urban voter. Um, yeah. Does that make sense? Are you guys okay? Okay, I'm not. Yeah. Uh, your comments are mass. There are just thousands of comments here. How many
Um,
people do we have live? We've got 446. Wow.
so I've socialism. A lot of people have asked if you could just say something about socialism ideology, please.
What do you want to know about socialism? Surely there should be a
I
specific
guess
question.
it was Jade. I guess Jade just wants to know general socialism.
Um, yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, we could do that. But if you no, in fact, I'm not going to say okay because if you want to know general socialism, I've done a quick primer on socialism on my on my YouTube account. I can't remember what you call it, or YouTube page or whatever it's called, right? So you can have a look at that, like a quick video on socialism. So let's not waste time going over socialism generally here because I want more specific questions. Um,
Someone asked really quickly how much to include in the interim judgments. I would recommend just one or two sentences, just basically summarizing your argument and linking it back to the question.
Good.
It really doesn't have to be detailed at all because that
Yeah.
just takes time away from actual arguments.
Yeah. 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 I think you're right. Uh,
I'm trying to. It's moving so fast.
it's moving fast. It's moving fast.
Grace,
Can you do okay? Someone's asked, can you do liberalism and human nature? Shall I do that? Let's do that because it can come up and it may come up. So let's do something on liberalism and human nature. What do you reckon, Nora?
yeah, I think human nature. I mean, as you said in your live last week, is probably. I mean, it's never came up before, so
Yeah.
definitely a focus in revision tonight.
Yeah, I think all of you do make sure you know all three ideologies and human nature. I think that's probably quite important. Let me just share another screen with you. Right, so liberalism and human nature. And again, I think I'm going to go through this at mega fast speed because otherwise, I mean, we spent probably half an hour on this when we did it together with in our webinars. So human nature and liberalism, right? There are two strands of liberalism. And that's the only two strands you need to know about. And I would normally do political ideas essays by agreements paragraphs and disagreements paragraphs, right? If you decide to do it another way, it's entirely up to you. But I would do agreements. They agree on the following and they disagree on the following. So I think the first thing to say about human nature is they all believe that we are born with natural rights. The reason why they say is all mentioned in here, right? So you can read this in your own time. But we are all born with natural rights. In other words, rights are not given to us by a king or by a president or by anyone else. Rights are our primary goods. We are born with rights, and those rights are embedded within our lives, right? So, and all classical and modern liberals accept these natural rights. So Locke was the first philosopher that developed the philosophy of natural rights. He said we have the right to inalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and property. And John Rawls said we have these primary social goods, right? So, he broadened what rights were, but he basically said we are born with these rights. Betty Friedan, modern liberal, said we are born with rights, and in particular, the right to equality. We are all born, men and women are born to the right of equality, or born with the right of equality. So the first paragraph would be about human nature and rights, and we all have natural rights. The second agreement would be that all liberals believe that we are rational creatures. In other words, that we apply our minds to the problems. We don't need to have wisdom and experience in order to solve most problems, but rather we have the ability to make rational decisions. And by that, we are individuals who have rational mindsets, right? So, and again, this is all the reasons why they say that. But both the classical and modern liberals would say that, our greatest asset beyond rights, the greatest thing we're born with, is our minds, our rational ability to make decisions. Conservatives, remember, don't believe that, or most conservatives don't believe that. But liberals believe that we do have the ability to think rationally. And that allows liberals to accept most problems in society can be dealt with through rational engagement, through conversations. And that's why liberals tend towards toleration. Conservatives, they believe that there's only so much you can tolerate because human beings are going to be naturally inclined towards their own. And so culturally, they're going to hate other people from other cultures or dislike them or have a problem with them because naturally you are inclined towards your own people, right? Liberals don't believe that. Liberals say, no, naturally, you have the ability to rationalize. Even if you come across people with different religions and faiths and no religions, you can find a middle path where you can resolve things. So Locke wrote the book on toleration, right? And in that book on toleration, he said that we should be able to deal with religious minorities and bring some sort of tolerance between them. And in the same way, people like John Locke would say that John Locke called it the overlapping consensus. I haven't got it in these slides, by the way, but John Locke called it, I've got hay fever today, the overlapping consensus. The idea that even though you've got lots of people with different views in society, you can find a consensus in between. And that's because liberals think we can talk our way out of problems. Now, I don't believe that fully, I have to say. I mean, there are some things you can't talk your way out of, and there are some things that, diplomacy doesn't work with. But liberals tend to have a great faith in human nature. And they think that humans are generally optimistic and good people, right? And that's another point, by the way. All liberals think that from a human nature perspective, we are all pretty good, or at least we have the propensity to do good. We have like a good qualities to us. Now, the disagreements on human nature is what are these natural rights? Like, yes, we do have natural rights, but what are these natural rights? Classical liberals make the natural rights pretty slim. So for classical liberals, it's the right to life, liberty, and property. Life, freedom, and property. That's our basic natural rights, right? And according to John Stuart Mill, who was a classical liberal, he devised the harm principle. John Stuart Mill said that in reality, our natural rights, that the harm principle is that as long as someone does not infringe on our natural rights, then there's no need for, and by infringe, he means that really infringe on our life, yeah, or take away our property, or completely take away our freedoms. Not just like, tell a lot, use some words, but actually completely take away our freedoms, right? Until and unless someone does that, we're not allowed to censor them. We're not allowed to tell them you're doing wrong, right? Now, the counter argument to that is the modern liberals, and the modern liberals say that rights are broader. Rights should be far more diverse, right? So, for example, gender rights or women's rights, these are modern liberal creations. Or, multicultural rights that are given to minorities. These are all modern liberal creations, right? So modern liberals tend to broaden rights, tend to make rights a broader idea, tend to make rights a an issue that is that's greater than the original right. So, for example, some modern liberals would say that to get employment is a right, is a God-given or a natural right, or uh, to have gender assignments, reassignment. That's a natural right. I'm just thinking about modern in the modern context, right? So trans rights are natural rights. Now, classical liberals will say you've gone too far. These rights are too broad. There are too many of them. And so they've in a way undermined these natural rights, because once you start saying there are thousands of rights, then these rights become inexpensive, and so these rights are diluted. So that could be your third point, I suppose. And I think the second last point is over individualism. Oh, by the way, in that paragraph, I've talked a bit about freedom, but we can come back to that later. Individualism. Classical liberals believe in egotistical individualism, right? They believe that your individual isn't, as in you are the most important part of the universe and you are important, right? Modern liberals have a different view of they of individualism. They believe in developmental individualism, and so their idea allows you to say it's not just about me, but it's the others around me as well. I don't just want to be filthy rich, but I sort of want others around me to also have the same level as I do. And John Rawls is the guy again behind this, because he argues that individualism, you only really feel individual, you only really cherish yourself if the people around you have got advantages and are just, right? Because you're going to feel pretty bad if you're making it and you're filthy rich, if you're doing pretty well in your life, but everyone else around you are doing very bad. That's not going to sit in your human nature anyway. And so you want others to be like you as well. Do you see? So I think that's how we would probably do a liberalism and rights question. Nora, how does that sound to you?
Sounds good. I'm currently getting annoyed because it's not letting me comment.
Oh, oh, is that because you've got a 60-second pause as well?
Oh,
Oh,
maybe.
sorry, it's my Leviathan coming out, I'm afraid.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
But I basically someone asked, a few people have asked for party division, like to look at party divisions.
yeah,
So I've tried to say that I've uploaded both Labour and Conservative party division essays onto the website. So
yeah,
they're there. So go to there and that has everything you need, hopefully.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the rest of the comments are just kind of general
The general comments,
comments.
people. So
Yeah.
what was
Oh,
it?
sorry.
Yeah, go on.
Someone asked if there's any examples of a party that started off as a pressure group and now contesting elections.
Green Party is probably the best example of that. The Green Party used to be part, and UKIP as well. I mean, they used to be effectively a pressure group, and then the Green Party decided they're going to join the political process as a means to pressure other political parties, right? So I think that they're still a pressure group, really. You could almost call the Green Party a pressure group in disguise, but they're using the political system to do that, and they're probably doing it quite effectively, I would say, because they're getting others to adopt their policy. So yeah, um, that's how to. That's probably how you do it. Uh, what else? What else?
Electoral system recent examples.
Yeah, Sky, you've always got away with words. De facto pressure group. That's just a fancy way, Sky, of saying they're basically a pressure group. But Sky has to use de facto. In Istanbul, there's a store, a famous, like a H&M called De Facto. That's the name of the store. It's a fun fact for you that I'm sure all of you have craved to know about, because, of course, you've only got an exam tomorrow afternoon. Um, can I bring my phone into the exam? Yeah, it's a very risky thing. It's a very risky thing to do that, I would suggest. I would say also morally, it's probably quite problematic. So it depends where you sit on the ideology scale. If you are neoliberal and you can get away with it, then fine. That's perfectly fine. But I think most ideologies will be quite conscious of of that level of skullduggery and immorality. So I would suggest to you That's probably not a good idea. Rim is saying, can you stop yapping, please? Thank you, Rim. I thought it was, I thought I was in a public service to you guys, but sadly not. What else we got? Anything else here?
People are telling you off for ignoring my question because you did.
What was your question? Sorry.
Recent examples of alternative electoral systems. Yeah.
Alternative electoral. How do you mean recent examples of alternative electoral systems?
I
Like you
don't,
mean examples you would use in an electoral system essay?
I think always go for devolved institutions. That's always my go-to.
Yeah, but it depends on like if the question was, should but that's a by the way, it's a valid question. Should, more proportional representation be introduced into the current system, right? Um, yeah, I think if that is a question, then I think probably you'd use devolution, and the successes and failures of AMS in devolution, the successes and failures of um, STV when it comes to Northern Ireland, right? Because these are the two proportional systems, so you would definitely use that, but you'd have to contrast it with the successes and failures of first past the post as well, wouldn't you? So yeah, I don't. Am I answering your question now? Maybe.
Yeah, they were
No?
asking about the kind of strengths and weaknesses of it.
Yeah, there's a question there about how can you explain the structure of a source question. Um, so Nora, why don't you give us your wisdom on it while I blow my nose? Yeah,
Okay. Well, I mean, I'd structure it exactly the same
yeah,
as a normal a non-source 30 marker, but you just have to make sure that you try and include the source in, I'd say try and include it in every paragraph multiple times if you can. But
yeah,
you basically just embed a quote. I think personally, people overcomplicate source questions.
yeah,
Um, they actually are better because they do include a lot of examples and arguments that you can use.
yeah.
So you structure it the same. You just have to make sure you continue to link to the source.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. You have to continuously link to the source. And I think what you would do is you quote the source. I would always quote it, and at least you quote the source 3 times. So I would quote it in the first sentence of the paragraph, and the source is there to make a point, right? Everything else in your paragraph is your own knowledge, your own analysis, your own evaluation, but the source is there. You're lifting the point from the source. I would try to probably put six quotes, so four against, four against, four against, as part of my source. But it's up to you how, if you can't pair up the sources, fine, but I'll try to pair them up. If you want to watch a good video on YouTube, I put together a source, how to answer a source question on YouTube, so you can have a look at that. And I think it's pretty cool. It goes for it quite well. Um, yeah. Participation crisis. Okay, so there's a question here. So yeah, you may get a participation crisis question. Let me see if I've got one. I think I've got a answer to this. Let me find it. While I'm doing that, Nora, do you want to say anything?
Um, Ruby has asked if you can get away with doing two paragraphs on source questions. I mean, if they have enough analysis,
Yeah,
you could. I feel like it's always better safe than sorry to try and do three, just
yeah,
in case, even if the third one's quite basic. But you definitely could if you did them, if you did them really well, it would be
yeah,
okay.
yeah. I think so. I think always try to have a third, even if it's a small paragraph. Try to, because like, yeah, examiners are looking for patterns, and I know they're meant to be professional and the rest of it, but they're looking for patterns. And there is a thing in the examiner's report which says that not broad enough, or whatever the phrases they use. So I think try to have three different points, right? But if you get two excellent points, as you quite rightly said, you can still reach for top marks, but I would say 3 is probably your best bet. Because the way that works is even if one of your points is, sometimes a little bit off the mark, I think you'll be okay if you did it that way. So I would always try to go for a third. Do watch the time. I mean, just practical question, point. With Edexcel, give 45 minutes to your 30 markers. Give half an hour to your 24 markers. Right. So, make sure you're not over. You don't give more than 45 minutes for those, unless of course you got extra time. But don't give more than 45 minutes, I would suggest. Participation crisis. So I would probably do it like this. I would say there is or isn't a participation crisis because of turnouts. I'll say there is or isn't a participation crisis because of membership of political parties. And I would say there is or isn't a participation crisis because of turnouts in other elections and referendums. So devolved elections, for example, right? And so what I would say is that there have been low turnouts across the board in recent years. Maybe it's going up a little bit. And a counter argument to that is, yes, there's been low turnouts in formal ways of doing politics, but in more informal ways like pressure groups, people are joining pressure groups. There are far many more protests today. There are far many more pressure group activities out there. We do now have Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, right? And so maybe the system is broken at one end, but it's not big. It's not broken because people aren't participating. It's broken because the system is broken and people are participating in different ways. So, for example, you've got these encampments, and that's a good example. We've got these encampments, these pro-Gaza encampments across universities in Britain now, right? And you can say, and I would suggest to you, by the way, that if you went up to those people and said, how many of you are registered to vote? I would suggest that probably a very sliver, a small minority would be registered to vote. I would probably say. Does that mean that there's a participation crisis? Well, yes, maybe, because they're not going to be able to vote in an election if they don't register. But maybe not, because they're participating. They're showing their frustrations. They're showing their anger, but they're showing their anger in different ways. They're showing their anger on the streets. They're in camping. They're trying to get the university from divesting from companies that contribute to this genocide. So I think that's probably a good example. The second paragraph would be on low memberships of political parties. And so we've got, generally speaking, very low memberships across the board. The Conservative Party used to be, a couple of million. It's now sort of below 80K. There's decline all across the board, really, in memberships of political parties. And that shows because there aren't enough people to canvass and distribute leaflets. So things are declining. But then the counter argument to that is the Labour Party is probably quite different. Until recently, they had 500,000 members. It's gone down, by the way, and Gaza has contributed to that, and the environment. I think it's around 350. So they've lost around 150k members. But even with 350k, it's still bigger than all of the other parties, right? After the referendum, the SNP got new members. And so, there are, even though political parties have, and then the other point is that pressure group membership is rising. And so we can say, and the analysis could be the reason why pressure groups are increasing and reason why political party membership is decreasing is because of partisan de-alignment. The idea that in the old days, your party was your birthright. If you were born in a Labour family, you would be a Labour person. You're born in a Conservative family, you'd be a Conservative person. That's all turned around now. That's no longer, people no longer associate, their identity was their political party. I think very few sad people today say that their identity is their political party, quite frankly. Like, I don't think my identity is my political party or a political party I support, right? That's not going to be my identity, right? And so people have moved on from that. So maybe you can argue, well, that's such a natural thing. The days of having millions of people in a political party are over with. And so it doesn't point to a participation crisis. It just shows the natural reality of a mature democracy. Yeah, I quite like what I said there, by the way. I would write that down. The natural reality of a mature democracy. That sounds great. Right. And then I would talk about participation in other elections. So turnouts in other elections have been pretty low. And we just had, for example, council elections, and the turnouts were under 50%. In some places, were 30% turnouts. In the mayoral, in the London mayor and the West Midland mayoral election, turnout was between 30 and 40%, right? Very low turnouts in these elections. And so it's not just in general elections, you've got these low turnouts across the board. And the analysis could be that even though, by the way, the reason why Tony Blair increased the amount, the ability, the number of elections that you could participate in, he did that because he wanted you to increase your participation. And what's actually happened is the opposite. We've now got a decrease in participation, and we can call that voter fatigue, right? So we no longer care about participating, right? And then the counter argument to that is that, well, fine, but we've had some really big turnouts. Brexit, 79%, 80% plus for the Scottish referendum, right? It's not as dire as that. And maybe we're over exaggerating that there's a participation crisis. And do you really believe that large numbers of people are going to turn out to council elections? Because they've always had low turnouts, right? And maybe 30 to 40% is fine for a mayoral election, because that's just the way things are. And so is it a crisis? So maybe if you've got the question participation crisis, you can almost say there is a participation problem, but can we call it a crisis, right? Is a crisis would imply that things are so bad that the system is now going to collapse, or it's creaking. And you may say there isn't a crisis. Now, by the way, I would probably say there is a crisis, because people, fundamentally, the biggest problem we have is that the Conservative and Labour Party are just so similar. It's a beauty contest. It's not about policies or ideas. It's about beauty. It's about who do you prefer at this moment in time, right? Because the parties are very similar, and deliberately so. The Labour Party realised that they're 20 points ahead in the polls, and they've done that by just sounding like Tories. So why would they change that? Like, why change that because people are so fed up with the Tories, they don't really care about policies at this moment in time. They just care about a more competent government. And so if you're a Labour strategist, you're thinking to yourself, should we really say anything that's remotely different to what we've been saying so far? Because if we do that, we're going to sound like that we're very different. So Wes Streeting, for example, he's doubling down on it. He's saying that I want more private initiatives in the NHS, and I want doctors to work on the weekends, and I want he's basically doing what the Conservatives are doing, but even more, right, because he doesn't need to do anything radical or different, because they're ahead in the polls. And unless something drastically happens to Keir Starmer, and he gets I don't know, gets a personality bypass or something, and he can be boring, and boring will win him that election. Yeah. How does that all sound to you guys? All good. Nora, how's it going? I've not looked at any of the chats purposely.
Jade is begging for you to do socialism and human nature.
Socialism and human nature. All right, I can do
I
some
think
of
you
that.
should.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. You won't get a franchise essay. Why would you get a franchise essay? That's Charles. Can a factor be EU residents being able to vote? I don't get what you mean by franchise. If you mean, okay, if it's a history franchise essay, okay, I get your point. Like, should the franchise be broadened? Yeah, I haven't really thought about that, actually. I mean, I haven't really written about it, but you're right. You're actually right, Charles. You could get a question, couldn't you? Should we increase it? So, how do we increase the franchise? Well, we allow EU residents to vote in general elections. We allow prisoners to vote. We allow 16-year-olds to vote. I mean, these are the three ways in which you increase the franchise. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think probably that's the way to do it. I can't think of any other means. I don't think that's an essay, Charles. Um, uh,
Can I
Jakey
give
makes a
my
great point about Wes Streeting. He's taken massive donations from private health donors. Of course he has. That's the nature of the game. Yeah, go on.
no, I feel like, I mean, I'm probably don't have the authority to say this, but I personally think that for franchise there is just isn't enough to do a full essay. I feel like most likely you could use the points as maybe examples for two-party system or
Yeah,
other
yeah,
things like that. But I feel like a whole essay, I've never, I don't know. I mean, if it does come up, I'm completely screwed because I have
yeah,
not looked at it.
yeah, yeah. Holly's asked a question. Do you have any topics I should focus on tonight? So Holly, I've done that. So I if you look at my last live video, I've go through. You can put it on like triple speed as you guys do, um, and just skim through it because I've basically just listed the essays that I think you should focus on. I think probably, but if my best bet for ideas is to think deeply about having covered all the human rights topics, not human rights, human nature topics for ideologies. So conservatism, human nature, liberalism, and socialism, human nature. Uh, um, Vasavi, do pressure groups include think tanks, corporations? No, they don't. Pressure groups are insider or outsider. Think tanks and corporations are not pressure groups, right? Pressure groups are separate entities. Think tanks are something different. Corporations are companies, right? So that's something completely different. And again, if you look at my last video, I do a little bit on corporations. So look at my last live on my channel. Yeah. Mark, we're not doing EU yet. We're not on paper two's a million years away. Forget paper two. Right. Yeah. People need to chill. You need to just do your best. I think that's a very good words of wisdom. Thoughts on Klopp leaving? Everyone has to go. I'm afraid. If Klopp was exceptional, of course, and he's got an unblemished record, and he's a good human being. Very good human being, right? But I just feel that everyone has their time. It's like politics in a way. See, the problem with politicians is they never resign, or few of them leave politics, and so all political careers end in misery. That's his fame. All political careers end in misery. Think about all of the recent politics, David Cameron, whatever, it all ends in misery, right? Because they stay on too long. Tony Blair, they stay on too long. Klopp is better than these politicians because he realizes if he just stays on and on, he'll become like, what's his name, Arsene Wenger, where everyone wanted him to go by the end of it, right? So you when people still love you, that's the way to do it. That's what I did in teaching. When people still like you, you leave, right? So because otherwise they hate you. Everyone's going to be hated. You just got to accept that in life, right? And Klopp, I think, was clever enough to bow out at the right time. So he's going to go down in the annals of history of being the best. If you don't know what we're talking about, the Liverpool managers has decided his last match was Saturday. So I would say that Klopp has done the honourable thing, but I just hope it doesn't become another Manchester United and Liverpool go downhill after us, because I think he was quite central to it. And Klopp, by the way, he had this method of the Moneyball method. After your exam, Google it, the Moneyball method, right? The way he chose his players, profound stuff, by the way. But anyway, it is what it is. Sorry, Nora.
Joe, you're being accused of waffling.
Yeah, that's true. Right, so what did we say? Sorry, Ellie. Are we doing socialism and human nature? Is that right, Nora?
Yes, please.
Socialism, human nature, right?
And then Claire has commented about Labour and Conservative division. To save time, I have both essays on the website for that. So you just go to alevelpolitics.com and both the essays are there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Nora's been doing some fantastic work, and she's put up so many of her essays. Nora is Nora, where do you fit into the ideologies? You're a true revolutionary socialist. You're doing it for the community.
I am. Everything I have is of public domain. It's of public ownership.
It's public ownership, right?
Yeah.
You're not one of these,
I'm not gatekeeping.
You're not gatekeeper. You're not one of his neoliberals. It's not
No.
about you. It's about everyone.
Yeah.
That's virtuous. That's very good.
Well, what can I say?
Yeah. How long is this live, Wasabi? I'm probably gonna do another half an hour, and then I'll probably. Why is bro glazing? What does that even mean? Is that a rude word? Glazing. I don't know what glazing means. Right. Okay. No, we said socialism and human nature. Let me find it. Yeah. Let me say a few words about socialism. Yeah. Give me a second. I'm just going to share the screen. Okay. Right. So let's say a few words about socialism and human nature. Before we do that, I think it's always worth knowing that there are three strands of socialism. So don't go beyond these three strands. Revolutionary, social. I'm just going to switch on the light. Sorry, 1 second. I've not had my dinner yet, guys. Pity for me. So you've got revolutionaries, you've got social democrats, and you've got third way. These three are your revolutionaries. Beatrice Webb is neither. Anthony Crossland is a social democrat, and Anthony Giddens is a new third way, right? Don't bother with any of the other strands of socialism you may have found in one of your textbooks. You don't need to worry about socialism in anywhere beyond these three strands, right? And I've put up a quick definition of these three strands here and what they stand for. These guys want to get rid of capitalism tomorrow, and they say that without getting rid of capitalism, you can't do anything. These guys here, social democrats, say that capitalism is probably here to stay for a while, so we need to humanize it. So we need it, but ultimately we want capitalism to become socialism one day, right? And the third way said, well, no, capitalism is brilliant. It actually works. But we want the nicenesses of social democracy. So we want free market capitalism, but we want to deal with some of the big inequalities that happen as a result of capitalism. So capitalism is brilliant, but it's not perfect. It can cause problems. It can be, it can be somewhat problematic, and so we need to deal with the excesses of capitalism. But capitalism is here to stay, and it's quite good, right? So these guys love capitalism. These guys don't like capitalism, but they sort of have to live with it, and they want to humanize it gradually, even in an evolutionary way. And these guys here want to get rid of capitalism, because unless you get rid of capitalism, you can't get to any better state, right? So then let's talk about socialism and human nature. The first thing to say is all socialists believe that we are malleable. In other words, we are not fixed at birth, but it's really the dominant society that makes us who we are. So you are a product of your society. You are the product of something greater than you and yourself. You are a product of the people and the society around you. So, for example, if you were born in a capitalist society, then your human nature is going to be nasty. It's going to be crude, and it's going to be egotistical, and it's going to be, money making, and it's going to be selfish. Why? Because that's had the greatest impact on your human nature, and you're malleable. You can be changed, you can be shifted, and capitalism has done that to you, right? So human nature is malleable. First point. Second point is that and all, by the way, all socialists agree with this. Even the third way socialists accept that you are sort of an imprint of a broader thing around you, right? When it comes to another form of agreement, socialists believe that we are cooperative human beings. So we are born to cooperate with one another. It's capitalism that comes along and makes us less cooperative. And so they all agree that there needs to be a system around us that helps us to cooperate. Yeah, that makes us cooperate with one another. There needs to be a system around us that does that, right? Now, um, um, that system, of course, they differ on, because the revolutionaries say that system can only be the overthrow of capitalism and the establishment of a communist society. The social democrats say that system is probably a more social democratic system, where you've got lots of welfare and you've got the NHS and free education and the rest of it. And the third way say, well, no, cooperation doesn't have to even be there. Cooperation is really where outside of that, you cooperate, say, in communities to take the graffiti off walls and to come together and to help one another to deal with loneliness and to help one another during COVID and all of this stuff. But the third way would say that cooperation is a natural instinct and it should be there, but it doesn't need to be at the center of our lives in our economic system. It can be done with church groups coming together and deciding that they're going to help young people into jobs or something, right? So they all believe in cooperation. They all believe in equality. They all say that equality is a natural instinct and we all are equal and we should live in an equal society. What they mean by equality later on becomes the difference. But they all believe that equality is a good thing. Now, this is particularly strong in the first two strands. I think the third way, they give lip service to equality, but they're not particularly interested in equality because they believe in capitalism, and capitalism is against equality. But the first two strands of socialism certainly believe that a more equal society is a better society. So I would certainly say the first two strands are very much in favor of equality, and maybe the first strand is tonally in what they say they like equality, but that's probably it, right? Now, when it comes to disagreements, well, they disagree on equality because the revolutionaries want total equality. The Social Democrats can live with some level of inequality, and the third way really believe in a society which has enough inequality, which is quite unequal. So I think that's true, and they've also got a disagreement on whether capitalism is fundamentally against human nature, because the revolutionaries say yes, it is. You can't be human if you live in a capitalist society. You and I are not human beings because we don't live in a capitalist society, or we're not in line with our human nature. The Social Democrats say that, well, you can still be human because you can make a capitalism more nicer. So you can humanize capitalism, make it nicer, and but the third way say that no, there's nothing wrong with being living in a capitalist society, right? Um, and the last thing, if you ever needed it, and to be honest, I've given too much here, what motivates and incentivizes people, according to the revolutionary socialists, what motivates you is to work for the community. According to the Social Democrats, what motivates you isn't to work with the community necessarily in everything, but it's on those issues like the NHS and education. So what motivates you is taxation. We put money in taxation so that we can have good public services. And that's a good enough incentive for us to live in a communal way. The third way, on the other hand, say that motivations are, we shouldn't get too carried away with having these like cooperative motivations. We are motivated by ourselves. So they disagree fundamentally. They say our motivations are really down to ourselves, right? And so they're quite close to Thatcherism there. They believe that the reason why you get up in the morning, the reason why you do things is for money, it's for personal wealth and growth, and so you can't strip that away from someone. So the third way, for example, would want to marketize the NHS. So they want doctors and nurses to be self-driven in their jobs rather than altruistic. So the other two strands want you to be altruistic. They want you to care for others. So the doctor fundamentally isn't doing it for money. The doctor's doing it for the vocation, and the nurse is doing it for the vocation. The third way say, no, that's wrong. The nurse should be doing it for money, right? And so you should have different grades of nurses. So they've got an aspiration to become a super nurse or whatever it's called, and to get greater wealth, right? So they effectively believe in a neoliberal dream that everyone is fairly egotistical and wants to have wealth. So I think that's a disagreement. I've done that in record time. I've got some quotes here from the different thinkers on human nature. So again, you may want to copy that because this is a quick, even a quicker summary of what I have said. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I please share my screen quickly to show my
Yeah, of
conservatism
course you
and human nature
can.
essay? Because a lot of people are asking about that, and I just think it will be easier for me just to
Go
show
for it.
show it.
Can
Because
you
then
share screens on yours? Go for it. Go and try.
I think, I mean,
You should be able to, yeah.
yeah. Um,
Simran's asking, by the way, is it worth revising referendums? Well, it's worth revising referendums, but it came up last year. You may get a direct democracy question, so I think it's worth revising it. Yeah, you may get a general direct democracy should be utilized. Is it working for you, Laura?
I'm working it out, I
Oh,
think.
so you should have a present thing at the bottom there. Have you seen
Yeah.
that? Yeah, press it and then share
Here we
screen.
go.
Here you go.
Is that okay? Well, that's
Yeah.
not working.
Oh, why didn't it work?
Um, right, carry on, and I'll work this out.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Everyone's praising you, Nora. There was a time when I was the legend, Nora, and now you're the legend.
I'm the goat now, I
You're the
guess.
goat. You're the goat.
Yeah.
You know, that's the problem. All careers, all political teachers' careers end in misery. Not just all politicians end in misery.
Sorry,
Um,
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it without you. Don't worry.
no worries, Mr. Patel. You are cooking as you can. You stay more on topic. Oh, sorry, Kays. All hail Nora. Mr. Patel's jealous. You know, you guys want to make drama out of everything, don't you? Um, can you, okay, this is a question here. Can you use core ideas of ideologies in essays on either state, society, human nature, or economy? Like, would you get an A star? Uh, I don't know if you get an A star, but it's a good thing. Yeah, you should use core ideology as long as it doesn't turn into a core ideologies essay, right? So yeah, I think you can do that. Yeah. Nora's doing politics. She's not doing it at Oxford. No, she's doing it somewhere else. Cheeseburger or hot dog? Cheeseburger. Um, I don't. You know what? Don't worry about grade boundaries. I don't think you should care about grade boundaries too much. Um, so I wouldn't worry about grade boundaries. Do examiners check examples, Zora? I don't know what you mean by that. I should we make up examples? I think that's a risky business. So I wouldn't try. I wouldn't do that. I'm afraid. I don't know. I suspect they're not going to check every example out there, but if it's a credible example that you've made up, fair enough. Yeah. How's it going, Nora? Did we get anywhere? I can't hear you, Nora. Oh no, because I'm not put you on stage. Sorry, Nora. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah,
I think I fixed it.
fantastic.
I'm hoping this will now work. Can you see
And
that?
Sky, yes, you can, Sky. Uh, Sky, send me your email address now. I can make you a. See, this is how I'm going to do it. The way I'm going to undercut Nora is I'm going to introduce Sky into the chat as well. You
Wow.
see how clever my strategy is here.
Can you
Uh,
see my screen now? There
I
we go.
can now. I put it on. I put it
Okay,
on.
perfect.
Sky, remind me of your email address, and I will send you the link, the invite link now, and
So
you can.
this is my conservatism and human nature essay. I don't know if this is clear, but that's an argument, that's an argument, that's an argument. So feel free, everyone, to just, I don't know, screenshot it.
Can you make it, on the bottom right, can you make your screen a little bigger? In the bottom
Um,
right, you've got that little guide.
oh,
Uh,
yeah.
bottom right, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, to what extent do conservatives have a common view of human nature? Okay, so your first paragraph, humans are intellectually, morally, and psychologically flawed. That's good. His second paragraph is a disagreement paragraph that, whilst conservatives agree with humans, but they disagree on the extent. Oh, that's good. Yeah. Third paragraph, another key disagreement over human nature is within the new right itself strand. Oh, that's good. So you've talked about within the new right, there's a disagreement on human nature. I like that. I completely like that.
People are
So
saying
that's
you're holding me hostage.
yeah, yeah. That's a
I guess so.
I guess
But
um,
yeah, so that's there you go. That's that essay.
no worries. Sky, I think I've got your email address. I'm going to send you the link now. So Sky was with us on our what do you call them? Our webinars. So yeah, she may want to contribute. What else we got, Nora?
Um, do you think it's likely we'll get another weird question like the question on pick and mix politics? Probably
I
not because they
doubt
got
it.
criticised. They got in trouble, the exam boards.
Yeah, they got in trouble, and we all sort of kicked up a fuss. I don't think. I don't think. Yeah. That's. I'm just reading some of these comments. They're funny. Um, we did something on media earlier on, so I don't think we need to do that again. Evaluate view that electoral reform since '97 has been ineffective. Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Electoral reform since '97 has been ineffective. So let's list the electoral reforms. By the way, I haven't thought of this question, so I think that's a good question. So we've had what have we had, Nora, since '97? We've had
um, Constitution reform.
constitutional reforms. No. These are electoral
Oh,
reforms. So devolution. We've had AMS introduced. We've had STV introduced. We've had SV. Right. So these are your three electoral reforms. So then, would you do it by those three paragraphs? I think you would. I think you would. I'm liking this question, Olivia. So you do a paragraph on, you know, AMS has been really effective. It's creating more SMP. It's creating more avenues for engagement. Sky's joined us. Hi, Sky. Um,
hi.
uh, so that's your first thing. The second paragraph, and then you counter that. Sky, you and Nora, you may want to give. So your first paragraph on this question is that um, AMS has been quite successful. It's allowed the S&P and others to rise up. But then the counter argument is that it's only allowed the S&P really, and it's acting like the first past the post system, and it gives you the illusion of choice. And in Wales, it's enabled a one-party state, and actually in Scotland, it's enabled a one-party state as well. And so maybe it's been pretty ineffective, right? STV in Northern Ireland, on one level, it's been effective because in Northern Ireland we've had like power sharing, but again with Northern Ireland and STV, it's so complicated. Turnouts remain low, and the problem with Northern Ireland is that they've not had a they've not had a they've not been for a long time. Their parliament or their assembly has been shut down, and it's been complicated, and the two parties don't work together, so you can talk about that. And at least in first past the post, people get majorities, and there are big parties in power. In Northern Ireland, you've got to deal with all these parties, and you've got to try to merge and find a middle ground, and that's not useful. So proportional, it's all of the arguments against PR there. SV, it was great because it allowed smaller parties to have a say in elections, and so it meant that unlike first past the post, you've got to appeal to a greater number of voters, and so Boris had to appeal to Green voters in London in order to be elected twice as London mayor, and so he introduced the Boris spike, and he introduced all of that stuff, and pro-environmentalists. And the Green Party, some members actually said vote Boris during one or two of those elections. But then the counter argument is that SV at the end of the day is like first past the post, right? Only one of the two big parties are ever going to win it, and it acts like first past the post. And so even though smaller parties may have some greater say in the election, they're not really going to get anywhere in those elections. And anyway, they got rid of it. So we no longer have SV in the most recent elections, and there's been no difference. The Labour or Conservative parties wins the mayoralties, and they're continuing to win the mayoralties. So has it really made any difference? Yeah, I think that's a good question, in other words. What do you reckon, Sky, Nora?
Yeah, I think that's good. I always like to, I don't know if this is a weird point, but I always like to talk about as a negative of electoral reforms, kind of them allowing quote unquote extremist parties to gain
Yeah,
power.
yeah.
Um, so to talk about obviously BNP gaining the place in the London Assembly. And I don't know, I just think that's always quite a good example.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, that's good. That's a very good example, of like a counter argument to PR in particular. Yeah, yeah. Um, so human nature. Alu says, were you in a webinar with teachers where human nature and conservatism was supposedly mentioned in an exemplar essay? No, I wasn't actually. That's great. Yeah, that's a fantastic thing if that was mentioned. So it could be a sign. They've talked about it and maybe it will come up. I don't know. Sky, have you got anything to say here?
For this one, I'm not a fan of electoral systems. It's the one thing I always avoid normally because I don't think in the UK, like it is primarily first past the post, and I feel like you're kind of nitpicking for points, and
Yeah.
I don't like doing that as much.
Yeah, electoral systems is you've got, so you would avoid it, would you, Sky?
Yeah, I've never actually answered an electoral system question.
Well, that's an amazing thing to say the day before the exam, Sky.
No, but
But
there's always been another one, and I've always just done that one. And if
yeah,
I
okay,
did
I
have
get
to
it.
answer, I would.
I get it. I get it. No, you're right. Yeah, you are gonna like. I think I quite like electoral systems because I think once you know it, you know it. But I get your point. It's a boring topic, I have to say. Um, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think so. So Alex Jones has said, if there was a fight between me and Alan History Nerd, that I would win. I don't think so, by the way, Alex. I
You
think
would win,
Alan.
Jow.
No, I don't think so. I think Alan is far more. This guy, intellectually and physically will beat me, no doubt about it. He's something else. I'm merely a speck on a screen. Sorry. Anyway, let's carry on. What else have we got?
A lot of people are asking, should they just revise conservatism? And I can't remember if I already said this, but personally, I think if you're really, really short for time, instead of revising the 4 conservatisms, I'd probably revise the 3 human nature essays.
Yeah, yeah,
Because yeah, someone's just said, what are you prioritizing? I'm for ideologies, because that is probably my weakest at the moment. I am just going to prioritize human nature personally.
yeah. I
Just
think
to add
so.
to that, I'd probably say learn the main ideas of the ideologies. So if any question comes up, like you want to learn the main difference between modern or classical liberals or like traditional or like conservatives in One Nation, so that if any question comes up, you have the general ideas of the differences between them.
I think that's good. That's a good point. Um, yeah, because that's a gift of a question, right? If you get a question just asking you to separate, what's the difference or agreements between the strands, that's a gift of a question. Um, yeah, that's good. What else have we got from our comment sections? I'm going back to. I'm just skipping to the end all the time. Uh, Yeah, okay, so there is a question. Olivia says, is the reason why Northern Ireland has had a deadlock is because of STV system, or has STV made it better? Well, you can say it hasn't made it better because you don't have a massive majority, do you, for any particular party? And so what you end up having is you end up having having to do deals with one another. That's what happens with PR systems. You end up with coalitions. And so, it does become um, quite problematic. Imagine if because Sinn Féin now have quite a good majority. Imagine if they were in government, they wouldn't have to be making deals with the Democratic Unionist Party, and so they would be able to just govern. And that's the benefit of first past the post. It allows you to govern. Yeah, great. So brilliant. So for those of you who may have joined late, we've done 2 human nature essays already. And a third human nature essay. socialism, human nature. Oh no, third one, you're going to have to conservatism. You're going to have to work it out, I'm afraid. Fantastic. Right.
It's on the. I have my conservative. I've said this so many times. I
Oh,
have my.
yes, on the website.
Yeah, honestly, guys, just go. Not to sound like an advertisement, but
Yeah.
go to. It's all on the website, so that will
Yeah.
help hopefully.
Yeah. Brilliant. Uh, yeah, I agree with that. Best shorts. What you said about the examiners. Right. So we've got a few more minutes left. So is there anything else you would like to? Yeah, it's free. All of the essays on the website are free. You can go to them and just go to. So shall I show you where to go to? I mean, just go to alevelpolitics.com and then you'll see essays and then click on the component 1 and you'll see that. Yeah.
Alec has asked the best examples for paper 1. If you go, I think was it 2 live streams ago?
Yeah, it was 2 live streams ago.
Yeah. We did, well, I say we, you did a whole live stream basically talking about contemporary examples to use. They're for every topic. I really recommend watching it. Not to toot your horn, but
No, I did exactly. I went through a number of good examples, and again, you can put it on your double speed or triple speed or whatever it's you guys do. I don't know how you do that, but and just run through those examples. Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. Yeah, what's going on now? Yeah, so okay, we're not getting very many specific questions, are we? Okay. Points for evaluating democratic legitimacy undermined by the state of the UK's representative democracy. So, yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if that question would come up. I'm just saying it. Democratic legitimacy is in the spec. So they could phrase a question like this. And it's really a question about participation, really. So I would probably do 2 paragraphs on the 2 paragraphs on participation crisis. The first 2 paragraphs we just went through. I would probably use those 2 paragraphs. But as I said to you in my session last live stream, I talked about how maybe you could have a separate paragraph on democratic pluralism. The idea that for every idea in society, there should be a counter idea, and that's a pluralistic society. And what I would suggest is that we're living in a world, we're living in a country where maybe pluralism is becoming less and less, and the government and the Conservatives in particular are trying to make this less pluralistic by banning forms of protest, by saying things about extremism which are over exaggerated, by making it much more difficult for minority rights, and by doing that by making it more difficult for pressure groups to act, and so you're limiting the scope for pluralism. So I would probably do that as my 3rd paragraph. But generally speaking, it is a question that's not too dissimilar to a political participation essay. That's how I would do it. Yeah.
You could talk about the Public Order Act as well and the Police Crime and Sentencing Act as examples of that. And during the coronation, there was the arrest of the Republican protesters for locking on when in reality they weren't going to do that. So it's quite draconian in a way.
Good. Yeah, I think that's really good. That was Sky, wasn't it? Yeah, you guys sound very similar, by the way.
Yeah. Someone asked, I think Fo, asked about examples for conservative division. For social policy, I would recommend, because recently there's obviously been a lot of talk with the banning of sex education in primary schools. So I would mention Jamie Wallace, who's an openly transgender Conservative MP, and then also talk about Boris Johnson leaving out transgender individuals in his ban of conversion therapy. That could be a division. And then also recently I watched, I actually saw this on TikTok, so TikTok can be useful for your brain sometimes. An MP, her name was Alicia Keir, I think, or Alicia Kern. She basically stood up in Parliament and said that by eliminating transgender people from LGBT rights, you are undermining the whole of the group, if that makes sense. She's a Conservative MP and she criticised her own party for that. I think so. There's a lot on social policy at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's good. So you
You
would
could
do
also do
social policy.
immigration policy.
Go on, Karen. Sorry.
You could also do immigration policy because obviously Rwanda has like open risk in the party because you've got people like Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, and then you've got the Prime Minister, and then you've got the more One Nation people who are a bit more skeptical, and the votes over that and the party rebellion, like fear that Rishi was going to lose, is another example.
Yeah, good. So you would do like.
Someone said, is Alicia Kern a singer? No, that's Alicia Keys you're thinking of. Don't get them confused. Don't write Alicia Keys MP in your essay.
That's right. Alicia Kern, she's Melton Mowbray, and I know that because there was once a plot, and they called it the the Mowbray pie. What's it called? The Melton Mowbray pie. Oh no, pork pie plot. They called it the pork pie plot because her biggest industry in her community is pork pies. So there was this Conservative plot where these group of MPs got together, and because of their constituency. Good. All right. Okay. So yes, Suella also criticized the Conservative two-child benefit cap. That's really interesting. Suella Braverman said we shouldn't have a two-child benefit cap. And believe it or not, she criticized not only the Conservatives, she criticized West Streeting for Labour personally, because Labour want to keep the two-child benefit cap. Here's a question for you. Why? Why would Labour want to keep that benefit cap for 2 children? Like, what's the signal they're trying to send out? Either of you.
Nora, do you want to go?
I was literally about to say, Sky, I'm handing over the mic to you.
Okay, I'll go then. Fiscal prudence. They don't want to be seen as spending too much, and that's something that Labour is seen to do, whereas the Conservatives don't. And also, they just actually don't have the money to fund it because they're already doing the breakfast clubs, and I don't think they want to commit to unfunded spending, which the Conservatives will just criticise them for.
Good. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is exactly what even though they don't believe it, by the way, that's the sad thing. The Labour Party don't believe that there should be a two-child consent. And by the way, Gordon Brown criticized it as well because he's very hot on dealing with child poverty. And he said the best way to deal with child poverty probably is to get rid of the benefit cap. But Labour know that if they sound like they're too... Even, by the way, if they had a way of paying for it, they don't want to sound like they're pro-welfare. And so it's in their interest. Always say in your essay, if it's a party's essay, if you're 20 points ahead, you don't change anything. Why would you announce a policy that may undermine you if you're 20 points ahead in the polls? So they're going to tinker around the edges. They're going to say a few things here or there. They're not going to say anything particularly radical between now and the election, unless they become less, their point lead contracts and they're 5 points or 4 points. Then they're going to try to be a bit more edgy, but other than that, they're not going to do anything. Yeah. So someone's asked. Okay, so we are going to finish now because I think we've gone on for an hour and a half. But I would say that what should you focus on between? Here's my thing. So I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not someone who can predict exams, right? But I would say between now and exam, what should you focus on between now and tomorrow? In political parties, focus on the difference between the political parties, right? And maybe at that Thatcherism or New Labour, Old Labour question. I don't know. Yeah, maybe focus on those, right? So difference between the parties, Thatcherism, New Labour, and Old Labour question. In democracy, focus on political participation and direct democracy being introduced to improve representative democracy. There's a example of that. There's a video I did of it on my YouTube channel. On voting behavior, I'm the other two about I'm less, but I think probably possibly something like economic policy has the greatest impact on the outcome of elections, or party manifestos have the greatest impact on the outcome of elections discussed. something like that could work, I believe, for voting behavior, because they've exhausted a lot of the social factors. But you probably need to make sure you know about social factors for sure. But I think probably think about that. For electoral systems, maybe a standard, I don't know, PR question. I'm the least convinced in my predictions of electoral system, because I think it's such a narrow topic anyway. It's very hard to do anything about that. I feel that for ideologies, do all of the human natures, right? Followed by conservatism, maybe, and the economy. Conservatism and the economy. Liberalism, I think, will feature quite. So I think you've got to do a liberalism and what did I say? Was it liberalism and there was an economy before? So I think it's liberalism and no, it wasn't even the state. No, it was liberalism and the state, or liberalism and society. Maybe those two as side. But I think, yeah. So that's probably what I would focus on. That's enough for you to focus on between now and your exam, right? So work on those questions, I would say. Right, I'm going to close soon. So any last minute questions? Oh, there's never been a liberalism and economy. Oh, okay, you could be right. Maybe I've dreamt that up. Let me just check. Has there been a liberalism and an economy question? Let me just check. You're right. You're right. Yes, liberalism and economy. Yeah, you're right. Do a liberalism and economy. In fact, there has been a liberalism in a state. Of course, there has been liberalism in a state 2 years ago. So not necessarily a state, liberalism and economy. There was a question actually, to what extent is liberalism more concerned with society than the economy? That's what I meant. So there have been a liberalism and economy, but it's a bit of a weird question. Yeah. Zora saying go live after the exam. No way, Zora. If I go live after the exam, that's going to be unless it's really good, unless all the questions come out, because you guys are going to attack me left, right, and center. So, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather have my dignity. Right. Mr. Patel, can you maybe go to sleep? I can't, I'm afraid, Hussein. Well, I can. If I carry on talking, I probably can. Yeah. Right, I think we're good. Kays, I would have to hide my face if things went bad. Yeah. Look, guys, I feel that focus on these questions. The questions, look back at my last live stream. Look back at the live stream before that on political examples. And I think you'll be fine. Yeah. Don't stay up too late. I know actually you've got a late exam tomorrow. So if you can probably stay up too late and wake up late unless you've got a morning exam. But, relax. Best thing you can do is try your best between now and the exam. Focus on the questions I've talked about today, and and I have a favor to ask. If you did buy my book, right, from Amazon, can you leave a good review for me? Just a little, it will be helpful for me to do that. So if you did get that, which is a component 1 and 2 questions, leave a nice little review on Amazon to say that you found it amazing and you were. It was the best thing you've read ever in your life. And, you just wish that you could sit your exam every year so you could use that book every year. That's the sort of review I want, really. Like I would very happily pass my exam, but not receive my marks so that I can read this book again next year and sit my exam and be on a perpetual cycle of because I just love this book so much. Okay, right. Sky, any last words of wisdom from you?
Be really careful about timing and you're all going to smash it.
That's great wisdom. And Nora, anything from you?
Just do your best, guys, and remember that if it's a hard question, then basically everyone will find it hard. So don't be put off if the question is worded really difficultly, because then the grade boundaries for that question will obviously be lower. I think that's the best advice I can give. Oh, and people are asking a lot about Rwanda policy. So again, go to the live about 2 lives back on YouTube. But yeah, good luck.
And watch Zhao's stuff.
Yeah. And go look at my essays on the website.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Nora's essays are great.
Well, what can I say?
I'm doing a component 2 revision day as well on bank holiday Monday, so it's on my website. So if you want to, I'll send it out on the email as well. So if you guys are stuck for component 2, I will be doing that on bank holiday Monday. All right, guys, wonderful. Thank you, Sky. Thank you, Nora, for all your wonderful remarks, and I will make sure that we get Sky and Nora on our next call and our next live stream. I think that's what we call it. So good luck to all of you, and I shall hear from you tomorrow. So let me know how it goes.
Good luck.
Maybe I
everyone.
will I'll put up a newsletter and you tell me how it goes tomorrow. But good luck to you all. See you later.
Good luck.
Bye.